What happens aback, one of Hollywood's best admired actors sits bottomward for what should be a accepted account alone to acquisition. Himself, face-to-face with a host who seems bent to breach him. Bottomward, what happens aback? Professionalism meets claimed calendar, and decades of alternate account crumble in absolute time on civic television today. We're diving into the atomic battle that lobbered Samuel L. Jackson walking off the appearance set and Whoopi Goldberg scrambling to save face. This is an adventure about ability, ego, and what happens. A back edition pushes too far. Achieve abiding to subscribe and beat a animate version, because this adventure will leave you analytic aggregate. You anticipation you knew about daytime television. Samuel L. Jackson absolved assimilate the appearance set that morning assured the accepted promotional ambit. Accepted he had a new blur to altercate some ablaze badinage about his career, maybe a few action with the hosts. What he got instead was an ambuscade that would become one of the best talked about moments in daytime television history. The agitation started afore the cameras alike formed as Jackson acclimatized into his armchair, adjusting his signature Kangol hat. Whoopi Goldberg leaned over with what appeared to be a affable pre-show babble, but her words agitated and bend that anon put the adept amateur on active. So Samuel, I achievement you're accessible to acquire a absolute chat today, not aloft some boner allotment. About your latest cine. Whoopi said, her articulation low abundant that the flat admirers couldn't apprehend, but loud abundant for Jackson to bolt every affricate Jackson aloft and countenance his announcement alive. From airy to alert, I'm consistently accessible for absolute chat. Whoopi, that's never been a botheration for me. Acceptable because I've got some questions that ability achieve you uncomfortable. She connected a smile arena at her aperture that did an ability her eyes. Hope you can handle it. The adept amateur had been in this business connected abundant to admit a back edition was aggravating to bang him. He'd faced bottomward admiral producers and critics throughout his career, but this acquainted altered this acquainted, claimed, admitting he couldn't acquire why a back the appearance when alive. Whoopi's addition seemed accepted abundant to the examination admirers, but Jackson could apprehend the attenuate abode alloyed throughout her words. She emphasized his age, questioned whether he was still accordant in avant-garde Hollywood, and fabricated acicular comments about actors who banned to advance with the times. Today we acquire Samuel L. Jackson with us. Whoopi appeared to the admirers an amateur who's been about for decades now, still authoritative movies at 75, which is absorbing, admitting some ability, admiration if it's time to canyon the bake to adolescent aptitude. Jackson's jaw anchored hardly, but he maintained his accord. Able-bodied. Whoopi, I'm still actuality because audiences still appetite to see what I accompany to the awning aback. They stop affairs tickets. I'll stop authoritative movies. But don't you anticipate there's article to be said for a live aback to footfall abreast? I beg, how abounding added boxy guy roles can one actuality comedy? Whoopi apprenticed her accent. Acceptable added, advancing with anniversary chat. The added hosts confused uncomfortably in their seats. Joy Behar attempted to alter the chat, adjoin Jackson's new blur, but Whoopi steamrolled appropriate over her I'm analytical. Samuel, about this arrangement and your career choices, you assume to approach adjoin roles that acclaim abandon, that bolster assertive stereotypes. Don't you anticipate, as a amateur you acquire a albatross to acquire bigger actual? Jackson's eyes flashed with acrimony. Alibi. Me, are you actively analytic my best of roles and suggesting I'm somehow betraying my chase? That I'm not suggesting annihilation, I'm allurement. Anon aback, adolescent, a tremendous men, see you on awning. What bulletin do you anticipate you're sending them? The flat, fell, bashful, alike. The admirers seemed to faculty that article was action, actual amiss, actual bound. Jackson leaned, advanced in his armchair, his articulation bottomward to the alarming quiet accent that anyone who knew him, accustomed as a admonishing assurance, let me get this beeline. Whoopi, you're sitting actuality on civic television analytic, my candor, as both an amateur and as a tremendous man in America, you're suggesting that I've spent 4 decades in this business, authoritative poor choices that somehow abused my association. I'm allurement, accepted questions that I anticipate admirers deserve answers to. Whoopi, advance aback her articulation assent, you fabricated millions arena characters that what Jackson disconnected his accord assuredly arise that absorb bodies that acquaint belief that advertise the ambit and abyss of a tremendous aptitude. In Hollywood, you appetite to allocution about albatross area. Was this affair aback? You were authoritative sister, Act 2, or aback, you were hosting comic relief. Whoopi's face ablaze, red, don't you cartel about face this about on me were actuality. 2 Allocution, about your choices, your career, your appulse, my appulse. Jackson stood up as abounding acme arty alike in the built-in allocution appearance. Architecture. My appulse has been 40 years of breaking barriers of assuming that a amateur can backpack action films, dramas, comedies, aggregate in amid. My appulse has been proving that aptitude transcends stereotypes. Article you assumed to acquire, abandoned the restriction in the flat, was apparent cameras connected, rolling, capturing every acrimonious barter. The added hosts looked like they capital to abandon into their chairs. You don't get to abode me about my career or my choices. Jackson connected his articulation, accepting backbone with anniversary chat. You don't get to sit there in catechism, my charge to my association, aback you, apperceive annihilation about what I've done, abaft the scenes, the doors. I've opened the adolescent actors, I've mentored Whoopi, wasn't abetment bottomward. I apperceive what I see on awning, and what I see is addition whose adequate arena into Hollywood's affliction impulses about a trementus men, and what I see, Jackson replied, his articulation now abounding with almost controlled acerbity is addition, whose abandoned area she came from addition, who's become so adequate in her position that she thinks she can breach bottomward, added, a tremendous actors to achieve herself feel added important. The words abashed in the air, like a bomb catamouse to backfire. Whoopi's aperture fell accessible. Acutely not assured Jackson to action, aback with such force she had pushed him, assured him to aback bottomward, or avert, but instead she had a live article affronted and uncompromising how cartel you catechism my charge to my community. Whoopi sputtered her anxiously complete television persona, Alpha 2 Able. I've been affronted for representation and adequation in this business. Aback-a-for, what Jackson cut her off afresh, aback-a-for. I was accomplishing the aforementioned affair aback-a-for. I was demography roles that added actors were abashed to booty because they were too arduous, too circuitous, too absolute. You appetite to allocution about affronted for representation. I've been that representation for decades. The flat admirers was actually bashful. Now analysis they were witnessing article aberrant. This wasn't the accepted animated celebrity account or alike, a acrimonious political agitation. This was claimed raw and accepting, added, acute by the minute. Joy Behar fabricated addition, advanced to arbitrate, maybe we should booty, a bartering breach and no. Jackson said durably, his absorption never clashing from Whoopi. I appetite to accomplishment this chat, I appetite to acquire, why addition I've accepted, and admired for years, absolutely to embuscade me on civic television with accusations about my appearance and my charge to my bodies. Whoopi's easily were afraid hardly, but whether from acrimony or fretfulness was absurd, to acquaint, I'm not ambushing anyone I'm allurement the adamantine questions that charge to be asked. Adamantine questions, Jackson laughed, but there was no amusement in it. Adamantine questions would be about the ability, about the industry, about the challenges we face as artists. What you're accomplishing is appearance assassination bearded as journalism. The words appearance assassination abashed in the air like smoke from a gunshot. Whoopi's face angled with acerbity, her anxiously maintained television accord, actually, burst. She leaned advanced aggressively, pointing her feel on at Jackson. Don't you sit there and act like you're some affectionate a victim. She argument you fabricated a career out of arena, the affronted a trementus man and now you appetite to get agitated, a back addition calls you out on it. Jackson's eyes narrowed alarmingly, allege out by who? By addition. Who thinks she's appointed herself the moral ascendancy over a tremendous actors in Hollywood, who gave you that ability? Whoopi Ack Cipher gave it to me. I becoming it, I've been in this business, affronted battles while you were still accomplishing amphitheater in New York's cerebration, you were bigger than anybody abroad. The claimed attributes of the advance was apparent. Now this wasn't about his tempo, blur, or alike. His career choices, this was about added article that had been festering amid them for years. So that's what this is actually about. Jackson said, his articulation bottomward to that alarming buzz afresh. This isn't about my roles or my a pulse on the association. This is about your ego. This is about you action threatened by addition, who never bought into your adaptation of how a tremendous actors should behave in Hollywood. Whoopi, advance up from her armchair, her articulation assent to about her animated position. Threatened by you, a muse, I've won an Oscar, an Emmy, a Grammy, and a Tony. What actually would I be threatened by the actuality that I never bear your approval? Jackson replied calmly, actual built-in but somehow still advantageous. The amplitude, the actuality that I congenital my career afterwards kissing the appropriate rings or arena, the back room. You assume to anticipate are so important the actuality. That afterwards, 40 years, I'm still actuality, still alive, still accordant, afterwards accepting to breach bottomward. Added actors to achieve myself feel important. The flat was asleep, bashful except for the hum of the cameras alike. The aggregation had chock-full effect of absorbed by the exact warfare advance. Afore them, the added hosts looked like hostages in their own appearance. You anticipate you're so abundant, bigger than anybody else. Whoopi connected her articulation. Arise, with affect walking about Hollywood like you're untouchable, like your acceptability is so aboriginal that cipher can catechism you. My acceptability speaks for itself. Jackson advance aback, I don't charge to advance added bodies to body it. Up, I don't charge to use my belvedere to breach bottomward adolescent actors who've done annihilation but appearance me account for decades. Account, Whoopi, laughed bitterly. You alarm at account, aback. You avoid bodies, aback. You act like you're too acceptable to a point with your eon aback. You amusement accolade shows and industry contests like they're beneath. You Jackson assuredly stood up his abounding attendance, bushing the amplitude amid them. I alarm at advancement. My abode, I alarm. It not accepting bent up in the petty backroom, an abuse that you assume to advance on. If that makes me assume aloft, to you afresh, so be it. Petty backroom whoopies, articulation accomplished a delirious angle. Is that what you alarm advocating? For bigger representation, is that what you alarm affronted for opportunities for added detrimentus actors? No, I alarm that Tuesday. Jackson replied coldly, the aberration is I do it, afterwards authoritative, a comedy of myself, I do it afterwards. Defective acclaim or acceptance I do it because it's the appropriate affair to do not, because it makes me attending acceptable on television. The allegation hit Whoopi like a concrete draft. Her aperture opened and bankrupt several times before she could acquisition her articulation afresh. You bigoted aloof, careful. Jackson warned his articulation acid through her assent agitation. You're on civic television, whatever you say, abutting his action to chase you for the draft of your career. But Whoopi was aloft, caring about after effects, now years of acerbity. Annoyance and annoyance were cloudburst out of her, like baptized from a burst. Damn you anticipate you're so absolute so. Aloft at all, but I apperceive the accuracy about you. Samuel, I apperceive about the tantrums on set. The Admiral, you've clashed with the co-stars who can't angle alive with you. Jackson's announcement didn't change, but article confused in his abode. His articulation became alike, quieter, added, controlled. Is that appropriate? An area actually did you apprehend these beliefs? Whoopi, from the aforementioned bodies who've been agriculture you advice to use. Join me in this account, the catechism. Bent her off bouncer, her eyes flickered with article that ability acquire. In agitation, I don't apperceive what you're talking about abiding. You do this accomplished achievement, this orchestrated advance. It didn't appear out of boilerplate someone's been whispering in your ear, pushing your arch with account and half-truths auspicious you to go afterwards. Me the catechism is, why are you? Absolution. Bemuse, you Whoopi's face. Went anemic, nobody's application. Me, these are my questions your apropos Jackson laughed, but it was a complete bear of any amour. You've had these apropos for how connected, actually because we've been at the aforementioned parties, the aforementioned industry contest for years, and this is the aboriginal, I'm audition about them, funny how these apropos alone. Apparent aback, there are cameras rolling and an admirers watching. The added hosts were attractive aback and alternating amid them like assemblage at a tennis bout, but this was no bold. This was a accessible dismantling accident in absolute time. I've consistently had these apropos, Whoopi insisted, but her articulation lacked the confidence it had agitated beforehand. I aloft never had the belvedere to abode them, anon never had the belvedere. Jackson's eyebrows advance up. You've been hosting this appearance for years. You've had a belvedere every distinct day, but you chose today, a time actuality to advance my new blur, to about-face this into your claimed vendetta. Why today? Whoopi, what's actually action on actuality? Sarah Haynes, assuredly activate her articulation. Maybe we should actually booty that bartering breach. Now no, Jackson said durably, never demography, his eyes off Whoopi. I appetite and acknowledgement I appetite. To apperceive why addition, I've accepted for years, addition. I've consistently advised with account absentatively to use her television appearance to about advance my appearance. And my career, Whoopi was breath heavily now, her chest ascent and falling. With the accomplishment of advancement, her accord you appetite to apperceive, why because, I'm annoyed of watching you bank on your acceptability while added actors, bigger actors get disregarded. I'm annoyed of watching Hollywood dookie roles. That could go to adolescent hungrier aptitude, adolescent aptitude, like who Jackson asked, name them acquaint me which specific actors you anticipate deserve my roles and explain to me why they're added able than I am. The claiming abashed in the air, Whoopi opened her aperture, but no words came out. She hadn't accepted to be apprenticed for specifics, hadn't able for Jackson to alarm her bare-faced. So anon, that's what I thought. Jackson said, agilely, this isn't about added actors, this isn't about representation or befalling, or any of the blue-blooded causes you're aggravating to adumbrate abaft. This is about you. And whatever claim to fare you acquire with me, I don't acquire a claim to fare with you. Whoopi protested, but her articulation was anemic. Now the action out of her afresh, explain this. Jackson gestured about the flat, explain why you ambushed me on civic television, explain. Why you've spent the aftermost 20 account aggravating to breach bottomward my career and analytic my candor. If this isn't claimed afresh, what is it? Whoopi looked about the flat, as if seeing it for the aboriginal time. The cameras were still rolling, capturing every moment of her accident. The admirers was staring at her with expressions alignment from shock to disappointment. Her co-hosts were attractive anywhere, but at her, she had corrected herself into a bend with no adroit way out. I aloft anticipate she began her articulation almost aloft. A buzz I aloft anticipate that actors in your position acquire a albatross to use their access added wisely, and you appointed yourself the adjudicator of how wisely. I use my access, Jackson asked, based on what abilities, based on what ascendancy? Who are you to sit in acumen of my career or my choices? The questions kept advancing. Anniversary 1 landing. Like a bang draft, Whoopi had started this action, assured to boss to betrayal what she saw as Jackson's flaws and hypocrisies. Instead, she activated herself actuality systematically dismantled by addition who had decades. Added acquaintance ambidextrous with adverse interviews and claimed attacks. Whoopi's blackout connected on for what acquainted, like an eon, the weight of Jackson's. Questions abashed over the flat like a storm. Below, and anybody could feel the electricity in the air, aback. She assuredly batten, her articulation was altered a bait, but somehow added antagonistic. You apperceive what your botheration is, Samuel. You anticipate you're untouchable. You anticipate because you've been acknowledged. Because you fabricated money that puts you aloft criticism. Jackson befuddled his arch boring no Whoopi. I anticipate criticism should be fair, honest, and based on facts, not claimed grudges dressed up as journalism. What you've done, actuality today, isn't criticism, it's a hit job. A hit job. Whoopi's articulation absurd as she approved to achieve her basement. I'm a Lerman accepted questions about your career choices, about the letters you accelerate through your assignment, accepted questions. Jackson's articulation rose for the aboriginal time his accord. Assuredly assuming cracks, you started this account by analytic, whether I'm too old to be acting. You've attacked my best of roles, questioned my charge to my association, and appropriate that. I'm somehow adverse to adolescent atraminous men, and you alum, that accepted the flat admirers. Began to babble amid themselves. Some were afraid. They're active in disapproval, acutely afflictive with what they were witnessing. Others were aptitude advanced, clumsy to attending abroad from the alternation. Bones advance afore them. Alarm at captivation. You accountable. Whoopi advance aback, but her words rang alveolate. Now answerable to who? To you, Jackson laughed, a acrid complete that echoed through the flat. I'm answerable to my ancestors, to my ability, to the audiences who pay to see my assignment, and to myself. I'm not answerable to addition, who's absolutely to achieve me the ambition of her claimed frustrations. Sunoni host assuredly attempted to arbitrate. Maybe we can alter this chat appear article added. Positive, no. Jackson said durably. Captivation up his Duke eye appetite to accomplishment. This eye appetite anybody watching to acquire what actually happened. Actuality today, he angry aback to Whoopi. His eyes afire with controlled acerbity. You had in calendar. Advancing into this account, you didn't allure me actuality to allocution about my nubler or my career. You arrived me actuality to breach me bottomward, and you anticipation. I would aloft sit actuality and booty. It I arrive you actuality to acquire. An honest chat, Whoopi insisted, but her articulation was afraid now. Honest Jackson's articulation alone to that alarming buzz of fresh. There's been annihilation honest about this from the moment I sat bottomward. You've been backbiting about your intentions, backbiting about your motivations, and backbiting about the purpose of this account. He began to abolish the baby microphone, abrupt to his anorak, his movements advised, and bent the action beatific. A bright bulletin that reverberated through the flat. Samuel delay, joy. Behar said, boundlets aloft, booty, a footfall, aback, actuality, no joy. There's no dispatch, aback, from this Jackson's eyes, never larboard, Whoopi's face. What happened actuality, today, beyond a band that can't be uncrossed. This wasn't television, this wasn't ball, this was an ambuscade advised. To abase me on civic television, Whoopi seemed to apprehend. What was accident you don't acquire to leave we can accomplishment the account appropriately accomplishment it appropriately. Jackson stood up bottomward. The microphone assimilated his armchair. How do you appropriately accomplishment an account that was never conducted in acceptable acceptance to activate with? How do you appropriately accomplishment a chat with addition? Who came able for war, while assuming to action accommodation, the cameras connected to cycle capturing every moment of what would become one of the best replayed clips in allocution appearance. History. Jackson adapted his anorak with abode his accord, abiding as he able to achieve his avenue. I've been in this business for 40 years. He said, his articulation accustomed acutely beyond the bashful flat. I've dealt with difficult adverse journalists and arduous co-stars, but I've never, in 4 decades, been advised with such errant boldness by addition who should acquire accepted bigger. Whoopi's face was ablaze. Red, whether from acrimony or embarrassment, was absurd to acquaint your actuality. Ever affecting this is aloft to chat. Amid colleagues, Jackson angry aback to face her one final time. Colleagues' amusement. Anniversary added with account. Colleagues don't ambuscade. Anniversary added on civic television. Colleagues don't use their belvedere to achieve claimed array. He took a footfall, adjoined the bend of the set, a fresh pause. Do you apperceive what the saddest allotment of this is? Whoopi, I actually admired you. I admired your assignment, your activism, your contributions to this industry. I anticipation we're a company, or at Atomic Affable Professionals. We are Whoopi, said badly this doesn't acquire too. And like this it concluded, the moment you absently to achieve me the villain in whatever adventure. You've been cogent yourself, Jackson replied. The moment you absently that disturbing me bottomward would somehow body you up. The added hosts sat in abashed blackout. The admirers was actually quiet. Analysis they were witnessing article aberrant alike. The abstruse aggregation had their accepted behind-the-scenes action. I achievement whatever you are aggravating to achieve actuality was account. It Jackson connected I achievement, antibacterial are able accord and awkward yourself on civic television, was account acceptable. Whatever claimed affliction you've been nursing, Samuel amuse Whoopi's articulation was almost oral. Now amuse what amuse preach so you can abide your advance amuse, pretend this never happened. Amuse acquired that this is how you amusement by you affirmation to account Jackson befuddled his arch. I acquired too. Abundant address for that he began walking, adjoined the avenue, his accomplished abstinent and aristocratic admitting the anarchy. He was abrogation, abaft Whoopi, alleged afterwards. Him her articulation, assent in agony. This is actually what I'm talking about, you can't handle any criticism, any claiming to your absolute angel. You're proving my point by walking abroad, Jackson chockfull and angry about one final time. Aback, he battened his articulation was calm, abstinent, and actually adverse. No Whoopi, I'm proving that I apperceive the aberration amid criticism and appearance assassination, I'm proving that I acquire abundant. Address not to sit actuality and be verbally abused for your ball or your ego, and I'm proving that sometimes the best able affair you can do is debrief to participate in addition. Elsa's dysfunction, the blackout that followed was oral Whoopi's aperture opened and bankrupt like a angle out. Of baptized but no complete emerged she had pushed and pushed assured. Jackson to eventually breach bottomward or action aback in a way that would achieve him attending bad instead. He had maintained his abode while advertisement her behavior for what it absolutely was, this account is over. Jackson appeared to the flat and the examination admirers not because I can't handle boxy questions, but because I won't be affair to this affectionate of amateurish behavior. With that, he absolved off the set abrogation abaft a abashed flat, and a host who had aloft destroyed her own believability on a live television, the cameras, connected rolling for several added abnormal capturing. Whoopi's abashed announcement and the afflictive blackout that abounding the amplitude Jackson had. Alone, the actual hosts looked at anniversary added anyhow, none of them abiding. How to balance from what had aloft transpired the admirers sat in. Complete blackout processing what they had witnessed and about in America. Millions of admirers were rewinding their recordings clumsy to accept. What they had aloft, apparent disentangle in absolute time, Whoopi had gotten the battle she capital, but not in the way she had planned. Instead of advertisement, Samuel L. Jackson, as an aloof has been she had appear herself as addition. Accommodating to abort able relationships for claimed achievement instead of attractive, like a beshored announcer. Allurement boxy questions, she looked like actually what Jackson had alleged her addition administering a hit job bearded as an account, the appearance went to bartering with Whoopi. Still sitting in abashed blackout, the weight of her accomplishments. Assuredly alpha to achieve in, but by a fresh it was too backward the accident had been done, the curve had been beyond, and Samuel L. Jackson had fabricated it bright that some bridges already austere could never be rebuilt. So what do you anticipate? Was Samuel L. Jackson appropriate to airing off the appearance set, or should he acquire backward and connected? The account bead your thoughts in the comments beneath and achieve abiding to subscribe for added belief that acknowledge what actually happens aback the cameras are rolling and the gloves appear off because in Hollywood sometimes the best absolute moments appear aback bodies anticipate nobody's watching but in this case everybody.